Hello, and welcome to Flunking the Written, a Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast in which two Uber fans discuss their favorite show, episode by episode, scene by scene. I'm Kimberly.
And I'm Megan, and before we get started, we want all of our listeners to know that this is a fully spoiled podcast. That means at any point during our discussion, we may bring up any part of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and its spinoff, Angel.
So if you haven't watched both shows and are sensitive to spoilers, go catch up on some of the greatest television ever created and come back here when you're done.
With that out of the way, let's jump right into this week's episode of Flunking the Written. All right, Kimberly, the puppet show.
The puppet show.
I mean, I'm just going to say it right now. This is a really fun episode.
It is. It's very fun to watch.
It's one of those...
And has a lot of good one-liners.
Yeah. It's one of those that I tend to, like...
Forget about,
yeah. It's one of those that's kind of middle of the road when it comes to season 1, but I really enjoyed rewatching it this time around and really like paying attention to all the little details. The set design, the direction, all of it's just really fun.
And this is the first time we see Principal Snyder.
Oh, who is a welcome addition to the cast. I enjoy him immensely, and we'll talk about him a lot in this episode. Before we get into our scene by scene, I just want to say that this is written by Dean Patali and Rob Des Hotel, and it is directed by Ellen S. Pressman. And our blurb is, Buffy suspects that a ventriloquist dummy may be harvesting organs from classmates performing in a school talent show. Which I think is...
Okay.
Yeah, one of the most straightforward blurbs you can get. I like it.
Mm-hmm. Well, the puppet show starts out with the point of view of the big bad for this episode, watching a dancer stretch. He says, I will be whole, I will be new, and so we know that there's a demon after the dancer right off the bat. And then we move past that to see a whole bunch of kids doing a variety of different talents. And we hear Cordelia singing. And there's a lot of Cordelia in this episode.
Oh, and Cordelia is so fantastic in this episode.
She is so Cordelia.
It makes up for all of the episodes that were Cordelia free because she is heavy in this episode and she is just absolutely that character. Perfectly that character.
Yes, and she is singing a very off-key rendition of The Greatest Love of All.
Learning to love yourself is the greatest love of all. I decided long ago never to walk in anyone's shadows. If I fail, if I succeed.
Thank you, Cordelia. That's going to be lovely.
But I didn't do the part with the sparklers.
Is the only song in this episode that I could possibly add to the playlist, but that sucker is going on that playlist because anytime I have an opportunity to listen to Whitney Houston, I'm going to do it.
Yeah. She's done. He doesn't have to hear anymore. She did a great job.
Mm-hmm.
And then Buffy, Xander, and Willow come in.
Can I just say, I want Willow's, like, rubber ducky shirt. I want it so bad.
I love that shirt. Yes, it's awesome. They're teasing Giles about the talent show, and we discover that he was assigned it by the new principal, Mr. Snyder.
Or Fuhrer, if you're Giles, but
yes,
honestly, that title fits Snyder perfectly. I think Giles had it.
And Giles explains that he tried to tell Snyder that the reason he became a librarian was to not have contact with the students, which technically he's a watcher. Yeah. I don't know if he's actually a librarian too or not. I guess he must be to have the job, but I mean, when they leave Sunnydale High, he doesn't stay a librarian. He starts doing other stuff. So.
Yeah. He had to be in the school to be close to Buffy, so he picked the library as his entry point because that he figured had least interaction with the other students.
Yeah, but I'm going to go with he probably was not ever actually had like a library science degree or anything.
Oh, no. I doubt it. I'm sure, like, either the Watchers Council cooked something up to forge the documentation he needed, or Sunnydale High standards are just impossibly low.
Well,
Both
it's
of which
probably
I
hard
think
to keep
are, yeah.
teachers.
Yeah, both of which I think are valid.
Yes. But they decide they're going to leave and let him do his work and run into the man they were just talking about, Principal Snyder, who right away is just his voice just sounds full of bitterness.
Uh-huh.
Like, he just, you know that he does not like anybody or anything the second he starts talking.
Yes. So, the way they introduce Snyder and the way that Armin Shimmerman performs all of this, because he's clearly supposed to be a red herring this entire episode. Everybody's supposed to expect that he's the demon. It works in the same way that it worked when they did that little bit of red herring with Cordy in Witch, where I totally buy that this is Principal Snyder, and they didn't, like, overdo him to try to trick us into thinking he's the bad guy for this one episode and then pull it back. No, he's always this level of intensity and just menace.
Yes. Yeah, he's always like this. He says something about how his predecessor, Mr. Flutie, may have gone in for all that touchy-feely related nonsense, but he was eaten. He mentions multiple times that his predecessor was eaten.
Yeah.
And I mean, just in this episode.
Yeah.
And it's funny knowing what eventually happens to Snyder.
I love everything about this. I love that Snyder makes reference to this multiple times, what happened to Flutie. I love that he's automatically so opposite of what Flutie was. And I love that he comes in and completely zeroes in on Buffy.
Yeah.
As a troublemaker. And it leaves me wondering, and again, I'm not even sure how much of this was predetermined at this point in the show, but it leaves me wondering how much Snyder knows at this point. Because we know that he has more information to a degree, at least that Buffy's important or Buffy is to be watched by the time we get to season 2. But here, we're not sure if he comes in with that knowledge or if he gains that as it progresses.
And I have a note about that. That is interesting watching this, knowing that Snyder's already in league with the mayor and that he's evil. I mean, we don't actually start seeing signs of that until season 2, and we don't fully know about it till season 3.
Yeah.
But there is a scene at, like, the 3rd episode of season 2, I think it's School Hard, where he says something to somebody about what we should say about something, and they said, look, we were told you could handle this job. And everybody's like, oh, so he knows about stuff.
Yeah. Like, he at least knows what's actually happening.
Yeah, so he knew about some stuff when he got the job. And I like to think he knew about Buffy the whole time.
Yeah.
Because he does not like her from the beginning. He zeroes in on Buffy, like, immediately.
I always wonder, though, is he evil or is he just manipulated? Because I'm not sure if he views Buffy as good. He views Buffy as a villain. So I don't know if he's manipulated into believing Buffy's a villain. It's been a while since I've really, like, watched his entire arc to know for sure. But, like, when, like, the mayor turns into a big snake, he's out there yelling at him, right? He wants order. I mean, so I don't know if he's just chaos for chaos' sake, or if he's more like he wants order, and anything that goes out of order, he's against. And he thought the mayor was going to bring order, and the mayor actually brought chaos.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he knows he's lying to the town about lots of stuff. But that's a good question. Which I pay more attention to Snyder during this watch through.
Yeah, I want to pay so much attention to Snyder because I think he is one of the best, like, side characters as far as crazy amounts of development that are mostly behind the scenes and, like, subtextual.
I found it really interesting when watching this scene when Snyder is talking to Xander, Buffy, and Willow. He's kind of getting on to them and telling them, I've been watching you guys. I don't like how you're always getting into scrapes, and this is what you're going to do. The camera cuts to Giles, and he kind of got his head turned listening. like if he has to bail them out or something, because he's the watcher. He's going to have to see what Snyder is saying and if Snyder is actually going to keep a bigger eye on Buffy and all that.
Yeah. I think Giles's whole dedication to this talent show, and he explains it as such, as it's a way to get Snyder off their backs. I think all of that is really smartly done to kind of force them into this position. But Giles is hyper aware of Snyder from the very beginning.
Yes. And that's part of his job as watcher. Mm-hmm. But then when Snyder just says, I think you three have to be in the talent show. Mm-hmm. It cuts back to Giles and he's grinning.
Yeah, he's just got a big old smile.
He knows he doesn't have to worry and he thinks it's funny. So we know our three have to be in the talent show now. And they sit down and are kind of in shock that they have to do that. And another act comes out. It's Morgan and his dummy. Mm-hmm. Buffy's like, ooh, I don't like dummies. They give me a wig ever since I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And Willow says, what happened? Buffy says, I saw a dummy. He gave me the wig. There really wasn't a story there.
I love that
And
line.
that always makes me grin.
I love that line so much.
Just scared of something to be scared about. It doesn't always have to be a trauma.
Mm-hmm. I also read into this where Buffy's like, oh, freaked out by the dummy. She's like, ooh, dummy. And Willow's like, oh, I think dummies are cute. And I'm just like, Xander hints there. Because there are several references in this episode that equate Xander to a dummy. And that is the first one I picked up on.
Morgan and Sid do their act, and Morgan is horrible at this. Which, he starts out horrible at it, and then all of a sudden he's amazing at it.
Yeah.
Watching it, you don't really know that the dummy is actually speaking on its own at this point. But I kind of think that's a cool idea for a dummy show.
Yeah. I think one, it makes sense as an act, right? It makes sense as kind of a comedy act of being like a terrible ventriloquist, and then having the dummy take over the show is a really fun setup, and it gives you that kind of false sense of security going forward. But also, I really noticed that, and it's just kind of his face, but Morgan, like, actually kind of holds his mouth in a certain way that makes you think that he could actually be throwing his voice, talking without moving his lips, which I thought was a really nice touch. But it's not so over the top that you're just like, well, why is he doing that if Sid's the one actually talking all this time? It's just subtle enough to make you kind of convinced that he's actually properly talking for the dummy.
And then we jump forward in time, and we see the dancer, whose name is Emily, by the way. And she's putting stuff in her locker, and she hears noises, and is someone there? Hello? And then all of a sudden you hear the demon's voice again. And the demon's point of view is like on the ground. Yeah. Which is another thing that makes you think that it's the dummy. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't really make sense, because when we actually find the demon or figure out who the demon is at the end, he's a human-sized guy. Yeah. Even as a demon, he's human-sized and like on two legs and stuff. Well, so it doesn't make much sense that it's way down at the ground.
It's also interesting because the voiceover is kind of made to intentionally sound more like Sid than, I believe it's Mark who actually ends up being it. I think that's his name. Yes. And it really sounds like Sid in a way. So it's clearly all designed to make you think it's the dummy. But there's only two scenes that actually have, like, at the very beginning and then this, and then we never have this voiceover effect again, do we?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. So it's just kind of a weird, like, they shoehorned this, but then they only did it for a couple of moments at the very beginning of the episode, and then they ignored it for the rest.
Yeah. And the demon, he says, I will be flesh, and we hear Emily, the dancer, screaming, and then that's the end of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and all of those taunts don't really make sense either, because a demon is technically still flesh. It's just demon flesh instead of human flesh. And so if this whole concept is it's a demon that's using human parts to disguise itself as a human, then some of the things that are being said don't really make sense as much as
the whole
a dummy,
I will be flesh doesn't make
dummy
sense.
wanting to be flesh makes perfect sense. So yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, we go to credits and we come back to the backstage and we see Mark has lost his rabbit. Mark is like scattered throughout this entire episode as one of the like funny talent show acts. So I think it really works that he ends up being the villain.
Yeah, because you never think about him.
Yeah, but he adds a lot of comedic relief throughout this. And then we have Xander, Willow, and Buffy preparing to perform their dramatic scene from Oedipus Rex, which is absolutely delightful that they have this through line and keep pretty consistent with it. One thing I will say about this episode that I absolutely adore is all of the attention to details when it comes to this talent show. Like there's banners in the hall. You see Giles at one point preparing trophies and certificates. You see him carrying costumes around. I mean, this talent show has taken over the school, and it is, like, in every scene, there's reminders that the talent show's coming,
They do it really well.
Yeah, I really love all of the set dressing and everything they do to kind of incorporate it.
We'll have a little a conversation between the three main characters, and it's pretty funny. We discovered that Willow plays the piano.
I know. I'm upset that we didn't get that in the musical. I wanted Willow to just
true,
bang out some magic piano in that.
They see Morgan and Sid, and they start talking about how he throws his voice and who he's imitating with his voice. And Sid the dummy makes some off-color jokes, and Buffy...
Okay, Morgan, we get the joke. Horny dummy, ha ha. It's very funny, but you might want to consider getting some new shtick. Unless you want your prop ending up as a Duraflame log.
And I love the little bit that they do with the dummy there, where he kind of looks over and looks concerned.
Yeah.
There's a lot of enjoyable dummy acting in this. Also, when Sid comes on to Willow, Xander says, "Hey!" Anytime Willow gets any kind of attention, Xander is immediately jealous.
Yeah.
So from there, we cut to Snyder and Giles. They are discussing all of the things that are wrong with this school, essentially. And I like this mentality that Snyder has, that Flutie was so wrong about everything, especially considering that kids are human beings, because that liberal thinking gets you eaten. And it's just, he's so very Snyder. He's so fully realized right from the get-go. But here he is talking very freely to Giles, which again I think makes me wonder again, how much does Snyder know? Because he knows that Buffy isn't trustworthy, but he seems to kind of find a common ground with Giles. In a few different scenes we see them talking, you know, here in this episode, but also at the beginning of season 2 we kind of see like a weird, like Snyder kind of likes Giles' idea, or a weird camaraderie there. It makes me, like, curious, like, does he know that Giles is, you know, Buffy's protector or in league with Buffy, or not? Is he trying to schmooze Giles to get closer? He's not really good at schmoozing.
Well, see, I don't know if he does know about Giles, because I think Watchers are a better kept secret than Slayers are.
It's very possible. But yeah, he definitely, Snyder, if nothing else, has looked through the records at this point and sees that in all of the different events that he listed, Buffy and Xander and Willow seem to be like a common denominator amongst all of those, and like just tells Giles flat out that those kids are trouble. A lot of this, I'm not sure how much they have thought out as far as making sure that Snyder's really a villain, or how much of this is just there to be a red herring for this episode, and they're just making him an annoying principal at this point.
Yeah, there's a small little conversation that's cut out here between Giles and Snyder, where Snyder says, he's talking about how you have to keep your eye on the bad element and stuff, and he says, like those three, there's something funny about them. I need to watch them and keep an eye on there. Keep an eye there. And Giles is like, no, they're not funny. No, you needn't keep an eye on them. They're fine. So he's kind of like, yeah, no, don't watch them.
Look away, look away. From there, Snyder basically just explains that the high school is going to be orderly and it's going to be quiet. and we cut over to screaming in the locker room. And I'll say, this crime scene is actually appears to be a legitimate crime scene, right? There's caution tape, there's police presence, there's paramedics there, but everybody's just kind of walking in and out freely. Like, I don't understand why the school librarian would be permitted access to that crime scene.
Yeah, and he just walks out like he was in there helping or something.
So I do like that when Giles goes over to our main three and tells them that Emily is dead, Xander makes the keen observation of, I hate this school, which, truth.
Yeah.
And Giles explains that the heart was removed and that it was removed by knife, so it doesn't make sense to be a demon. And Buffy's spider sense is tingling, and she's like, nope, we're on a Hellmouth, it's a demon. But this proposes like the first kind of difference between a human villain and a supernatural villain, right? Because Giles says that if it is a human, it's more complex.
Demon is a creature of evil, pure and very simple. Person driven to kill is it's more complex.
The creep factor is also heightened. It could be anyone. It could be me. It's not, though.
But of course, it doesn't really go anywhere in this particular episode because we have knowledge that it actually is a demon, but it does start to pose that question that we'll revisit again and again throughout the series.
So these interview scenes where they're all being detectives and interviewing people to see if anyone saw Emily the day before, they cut back and forth a lot.
This is literally how I have it in my notes, and I could just read it like this. This is the interview section. Buffy, Giles, Willow, and Xander all talk to different people, and they all bring up Morgan, except Cordy, who obviously talks about herself.
Yes. Xander interviews Cordy, and she talks about how Emma was her very best friend. Mm-hmm. And Xander's like, Emily. Giles interviews Mark. Willow interviews Elliot. And I'm not sure who he is. Oh, yeah, I've got in my notes that Carrot Top. Like Carrot Top. But that's basically it. And they all meet back together and say, you know, right now, it all came down to the same person, Morgan.
Mm-hmm. But before that, Buffy actually goes to talk to Morgan. Sid and Morgan are in a conversation when Buffy approaches. And Morgan kind of tries to cover it up, saying he's practicing throwing his voice and, like, hides Sid away in the suitcase. And we have all this creepy stuff with Sid's eyes moving. But here's a clue to Morgan's headaches, which was mentioned briefly in the interview sections. But, like, here you see it firsthand of him, like, really, like, struggling and holding his head, which obviously is a main plot point later on in this episode. But what I will give Morgan here is Morgan seems to actually be trying to tell Buffy about Sid in this scenario. Like, he seems like he's ready to tell Buffy exactly what's going on, and then kind of panics and then just runs off.
Which, considering Morgan's medical issues, which we find out later he has a brain tumor, he probably thought, knowing what was wrong with him and everything, that he was hallucinating Sid.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. If if
he thought he was imagining it, because I mean, they talk about what Sid is doing, that he's after somebody. So Sid has told him he's a demon hunter, cursed to be a dummy, and all this other stuff. And Morgan probably thinks he's hallucinating.
Yeah,
like none of it's real.
Very possible. But also, like, there's several instances where Sid is like the only thing that's real, which is really a complex thing for him. He, later on, when the teacher takes him away and, like, Xander gets a hold of him, Morgan is really distraught that he doesn't have Sid.
Yes, really wants Sid back. Which could be either he is that attached to Sid or he's that scared Sid's gonna maybe talk to someone else. I don't know. He might.
There's some layers there of complexity that I'm not really sure are actually in this episode. It may just be us overreading the situation. But I like that. I like that, you know, there could be a layer to Morgan that's just thinks because of all of the issues with him mentally that he's starting to hear his puppet talk to him.
And has a fantastic story about being a demon hunter.
Mm-hmm.
Sid is kind of defensive of Morgan in this scene.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, leave him alone. So it kind of shows like where Sid's kind of attached and protective of Morgan.
It's an odd relationship.
Oh, definitely.
And especially after Morgan dies, it kind of isn't touched on again, but it seems like the two have a dependency on each other that is most likely unhealthy, but also has formed a bond between them. So then we go back to the library, and Xander is talking about if he had 5 more minutes with Cordy, then they would have had another organ donor on their hands. But I also wrote in my notes, or they would have kissed.
Yeah,
one
of
or
the other.
And then Willow suggests, once they figure out that Morgan's the common denominator, that they need to do a complex sting operation, which is quite delightful, especially following I, Robot You, Jane, when the complex sting operation for Buffy was just a trench coat and sunglasses. So they're trying to get more elaborate in this one. But unfortunately, they don't have enough to go off of yet. But Giles, again, very aware that Snyder is watching them, and that's a big through line, again, that kind of acts as a red herring, but also is like a very realistic part of this episode of Giles's job to protect Buffy, is to make sure that Snyder doesn't find out, or that, you know, he's on the level.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a nice thread through this episode that I think is very consistent.
Yeah, and in the scene, Willow pulls up Morgan's locker number so they can kind of investigate.
Mm-hmm.
And Buffy attempts to get into his locker, which I'm guessing the combinations to the lockers are in the files too, because she knows his combination when she goes to the locker.
No, she doesn't. She breaks it.
Oh, that's true, but she tries first.
Yeah, I think she's like just
she says 3 to the right, 2 to the left.
She's just amusing herself. I think so. I think that's just Buffy amusing herself. She doesn't have enough time to watch television or anything with all the slaying, so she's got to get her lulls where she can.
I thought it was weird that they knew his combination from looking up what locker is his, and she was trying to open it when she couldn't, and then she busted it. That's kind of
I totally saw that as a gag where Buffy was just having fun. She was just like, okay, I'm just putting in the combo. Okay, no one's around, and then busts it open.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, right when she does that, Mr. Snyder is there, and he tells her school hours are over. Therefore, you should be gone.
Finally, someone who gets it.
Yeah, I put in my notes since when.
These people are here 24/7. What are you talking about?
Half the students are currently in the school. So, I mean, and I love his things that I will not tolerate.
There are things I will not tolerate. Students loitering on campus after school. Horrible murders with hearts being removed. And also smoking.
I love that.
I think the smoking's going to come up again in the next couple of episodes. I think there's actually a scene where, like, a student goes down to the basement. It may be the very next episode.
Yes.
A student goes down to the basement to smoke and gets just destroyed by a monster. And I'm just like, oh.
Is Nightmares next?
I think so. I think that's right. And I'm thinking like, oh, that's why Snyder's so against smoking. It leads to getting beaten to death.
Anyway, Snyder, he tells her to go home and then leaves. Mm-hmm. Like, he doesn't actually make sure she leaves to go home. He just goes.
He does that a few times in the episode. Where he's just like, now behave, Buffy, and he walks off.
And then we get a scene with Sid and Morgan where Sid is talking about how strong Buffy is and she's the one and we have to do it. And Morgan says he won't and Sid says I will. And at this point, we think Sid is the bad guy.
The at last I'll be free line is the obvious tell there. They'd be like, so this is the threat.
Then we move to Buffy's bedroom and she's in her pajamas and we get to see Mom again. Joyce is in this one. And they're talking, saying goodnight, and Mom says she's going to come to the talent show, and Buffy's like, no, don't, please don't come. And they work it out where Joyce is not going to come, and Buffy goes to bed. And as she turns her light out and goes to bed, we see out the window, there's Sid.
Yeah.
looking at her, which is a very, very creepy scene.
Yeah.
I have a thing about windows at night, like seeing someone in them. It's always been kind of a creep factor of mine.
So,
like, especially houses that have entire walls of windows. Oh, I can't stand that.
if this makes you feel better, I have a very amusing description for whenever Sid is running around the room. I call it...
See, that doesn't bother me. It's just seeing him at the window.
I call it the Sid skitter. So I thought that might lighten the mood after the window. But yeah. Sid, there's a nice Sid skitter, which Buffy hears and, like, wakes her up, and then she sees Sid in the darkness for, like, a split second and freaks out. And this is, like, legit, you know that Buffy is terrified of puppets, because she, like, calls her mom in to check her bed for her.
Yes, she starts screaming.
Like, Buffy is legit afraid of dummies. Which is cool. I like that the irrational fear is still there. I don't know why it doesn't come up in nightmares, because clearly I think she would probably have been having some nightmares about dummies, but maybe meeting Sid and meeting a good dummy cured her of her terrors. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think nightmare is your worst fear. Like, it's only your worst fear. It's not any fear.
I don't know. Xanders are really dumb. But we'll talk about that in that episode.
Yeah. Okay, and then we go to dress rehearsal for the talent show, and we've got everyone kind of doing stuff, and Cordelia is very upset that she has to follow a rock and roll band.
But the mood, it'll be all wrong. My song is about dignity and human feelings and personal hygiene or something.
I love that line. And Giles does this thing about her hair, where he looks at her and he's like, I'm sorry, your hair. And she freaks out that something's wrong with her hair and runs off. At some point, Xander and Giles were talking about how to get rid of Cordelia.
They were plotting.
Like they were literally talking about tricks to get rid of Cordelia at some point.
Yeah, I really wonder how I would have reacted to Cordy if I didn't have her full context going into season 1. Because I know a lot of people hate Cordy at first and then kind of learn to love her, and that's kind of the intent. I have just always loved Cordelia, and I kind of think I would love her even without context further on. I just think she's hilarious. She's so much fun.
Well, I started watching in season 2, and she wasn't quite as catty and mean in season 2 until after her and Xander implode. I don't know what it would be like to see Cordelia from the very beginning, but yeah, I can imagine not liking her. She is funny, though.
Yeah, I enjoy her immensely. Buffy enters and immediately, like, tells everybody that she thinks Sid was in her room, and they all look at her like she's crazy.
Yeah.
It was like it pounced on my face.
Like a cat.
Yeah, exactly. But when I turned the lights on, it was already gone. I think it went out my window.
Like a cat.
Yeah, no, it was Sid, the dummy.
And Giles tries to tell her it was possibly just a nightmare. Willow says, you did say they creep you out, and I'm just like, y'all, seriously, it's Buffy. She's a Slayer.
Always
Trust
right.
her. Right, she's always right. Why are you trying to
She got to
argue with her?
giant praying mantis lady and hyena people. Just trust her.
And Malcolm.
Yeah.
She knew something was up with that. Y'all need to listen to Buffy. Stop trying to tell her it was a cat or a nightmare.
That Slayer intuition is real, man.
Yeah.
So Giles explains that he has developed at least one possible demon culprit, which is a demon that is known to disguise itself as a human but needs organs to survive, which would explain the missing heart from Emily. But he also says that Morgan doesn't really make sense as the culprit because the demons would be super strong, and Morgan seems to be getting weaker.
And then we're in a classroom, and a teacher is teaching history, and Sid says things when the teacher calls on Morgan.
You can't just fog over this creepy scene where Sid turns back and just stares Buffy down.
Oh, yeah.
You can't just skip over that.
I did forget about that. Sid turns and stares at Buffy. Just stares at her.
Yeah, I don't even have,
it is creepy.
Yeah, I don't even have, like, a phobia of dummies, and that, like, wigs me out. I'm just like, ooh.
Yeah. I still think the window thing was creepier. Just
But yeah, Sid gets taken away by the teacher and put into the cupboard.
Yeah, because he's trying to be protective of Morgan.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can tell he has a headache. He doesn't feel good. And the teacher is like, pay attention, She takes him and says he can have him back after school. And then after school, Morgan comes back to get the dummy, and teacher starts like she's going to go get it, and then stops and says, is everything okay at home here at school? And my notes in this are just like, wouldn't a teacher already know about something as serious as a student having a brain tumor?
I have notes that wouldn't everybody know if he's really missed as much school as they've wouldn't at least that something's going on.
There's a medical issue.
Yeah.
Because she acts like she doesn't know anything. And later we find out that he missed a lot of school.
Yeah.
So she would know something.
It's real dumb. But yeah, that was a note for me too. It was just like she should know that there's
something's going on.
Stuff going on.
She talks about how lately he's not all there and try not to let other things get in the way. And I'm sitting here like, he's got a brain tumor.
Yeah.
Although later when they discover that he has the brain tumor, there's this line that got cut. It's in the script book, but it's a line that got cut where Willow says, it says he's terminal. I'm not sure that would be in his school file, but even if it was, if it was true, why is he at school? I'm sorry, but if I'm a high school student and I discover I have a brain tumor that cannot be treated and I'm dying, I'm not going to history class. I'm not.
You don't want to learn about the Monroe Doctrine?
No, I'm not going to school. But yeah, the teacher doesn't really know what's going on with her student. And then they open the cabinet he's supposed to be in, and he's not there.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that got cut, which is it's just kind of one line, and it says that Morgan lunges across the desk and grabs the teacher and pulls her up to his face and shakes her, which does not happen. That scene got cut, but in the original script, he attacks her.
That's probably too far. I think what they did is actually really good. I think his level of freak out is really good. You can tell.
Yeah, where he can't find him.
You can tell that there's panic and fear, and that works with this idea of Sid is dangerous, right? Because it shows a level of perhaps control that he has over this kid.
So then we cut to the library, and Xander has Sid.
Hi, Buffy. Hi, Willow. Would you like to hear some off-color jokes?
Really don't think you should be doing that.
What? Come on. I am not real.
Xander, quit it.
He's not real. I think our demonstration proves that Sid is wood. Now, why don't you go find Morgan and prove he's whatever he is?
I imagine he's looking for his puppet.
I'll go find Morgan. You watch the dummy.
Bye-bye now. I'm completely inanimate. Red Rob! Red Rob!
And Buffy, when she's looking for Morgan, runs into Mr. Snyder, Principal Snyder, who is being all kinds of creepy still and lurking around in the dark.
I really hate the line, "It's not safe for a girl alone." That's a line that a principal should never say to any student under any circumstance.
Yeah, especially alone with them in the dark. Yeah.
On a better note, I love the design of the backstage area. I just love all the little details and all of the props and all the accent pieces they did. But particularly, I think it's funny that on the door that Buffy tries to push, there's somebody has taken a picture of a demon and put it on that door.
I did not see that.
It's like it looks like a picture that would have been out of one of Giles's books. It's that accurate to what the actual demonology books have in it. And it's just in there. It's just in the window of that door. It's just perfectly plastered in there. And I'm just like, that's gotta mess some people up. Buffy kind of threateningly, after Snyder says his creepy comment about girls being alone, says that she knows how to take care of herself, and Snyder kind of just yep, and leaves.
Yeah, he's like, all right. And goes away.
So it's
again.
another example of like just leaving Buffy alone.
Yeah, just it's almost like he's set up to harass her and then leaves. It's weird. The interactions with Principal Snyder are very, very strange in this episode. And I understand they're kind of like trying to give you a wild herring that he might be the bad guy, but they're still weird. And then we go to Willow and Giles doing their research, and they're talking about how inanimate objects like dolls and mannequins can act upon their desire to become human.
Mm-hmm.
By harvesting organs.
Yeah, which I noted Willow found out when she was looking in the section on toys and magic, which says a lot about the library at Sunnydale High, that it has a section on toys and magic.
Yeah, I don't think my high school library had a section on toys and magic.
Giles has his own filing system.
Yeah.
Which really makes me wonder, because it's proven later on that Giles isn't always the best at, like, curating books that are safe for people to get access to, or items, because that comes up in the magic shop where he has stuff that people can just buy that are really, really dangerous, and he just doesn't really think about it. But, like, here, he's got a lot of probably his personal collection in this library.
Yes.
And I'm just like, there's gotta be something where somebody found one of these books at the library and figured out how to summon a demon or something awful. I mean...
Well, maybe he doesn't let his personal collection at the library get checked out.
Maybe. Maybe, like, the stacks are just off limits.
Maybe. Yeah. And then we go to Xander, who gets up and kind of walks around the table, and he blocks the view of Sid when he does it, and when he moves back, Sid is gone. Mm-hmm. And he screams. And in the script book, when Giles and Willow come down to check on him, Xander is standing on the table. And they run down and stand on the table, too. Oh,
okay. I was about to say, he is standing on the table, but they decide to also join him. It's the safest place.
Yeah, in the actual show, they just kind of start looking down at their feet. Mm-hmm. And around their feet. But, and I just picture when Buffy comes back with Sid, you know, because later she comes back with Sid.
They're all still on the table.
Them coming into them all three standing on the table.
That's my headcanon. Yeah. That's what happens off screen. Yeah. So then we cut back to Buffy, who's still backstage, and she discovers a body, which is Morgan's, and she says the demon's got himself a brain. After backing away, is pinned down by a falling chandelier. And then we get more Sid skitter, which is my favorite little touch. I love the Sid skitter. But Buffy should totally be able to lift that chandelier easier than...
Yeah, I think so too. I don't think it should be too heavy.
It looks...
Although you will probably enjoy this part, but part of the description when she's laying under it is that she hears a skittering noise.
Yay!
As something descends from the catwalk.
Yay! Accurately named.
I thought you might like that.
Accurately named. I also put down Sid stabby stabs. My notes are very professional.
He does stabby stab. And he misses every time. He's not a very good demon hunter,
no.
I don't think.
So Buffy gets free and pins him against the wall, and they interrogate each other, and then realize that, in fact, neither of them is a demon. And then we cut back to the library, and this amazing shot that just pans across all of the Scoobies' faces as Sid is explaining his history and the curse that made him a dummy. And oh my god, this is just an amazing shot.
I have in my notes that they have the "we should have listened to Buffy" faces.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So Sid the dummy explains that he is a demon hunter because he was cursed by a really mean demon and became a dummy, and he has to kill all the demons that are the kind of demon that cursed him so that he cannot be a dummy anymore.
Yep. He's done 6 of the 7. 1 remains. Yeah. But yeah, from here we start laying out for the final act. But I like that Sid is the one that proposes to do the power circle, and like tells them how to get everybody like pepped up in the backstage area and everything like that, and then makes the comment, "How did Giles get that gig?"
Yeah.
Which makes me wonder about Sid's history, because I imagine as a dummy, he's probably been pulled
In a lot of
into a
shows.
lot of shows, so he is probably very familiar with backstage stuff, and I thought that was a neat touch.
Yeah, it is. It's true. Although I would like to point out that in literally any other school, the talent show would be canceled because of 2 student murders. I'm just saying. Like,
The show must go on, Kim.
yeah, but I don't think this would be happening in any other school. We see Cordelia freaking out about stage fright, which is interesting because she doesn't strike me as someone who would have stage fright.
I think it's that element of she realizes maybe I'm not the world's best singer, because like the singing definitely comes up again.
She's not.
Acting she does fine, and like anytime that she's on the stage for any kind of social event or anything like that, you know, prom or homecoming or whatever it is. I don't know, I think it's like Spring Queen or something. I don't know. She's on the stage for something like that. She has no fear with that. But singing specifically, I think she got to a point because she has to sing again later on in Angel, and she's always uncomfortable singing. That was the particular stage fright that she had.
So we see Sid and Buffy, and they're discussing hunting demons, and Buffy tells him that she's the Vampire Slayer. Mm-hmm. He knew a Slayer in the 30s.
Yeah.
A Korean chick who was very hot.
Yeah. Which is interesting. I don't know if people have actually, like, bothered with all of the different canon Buffy stuff to try to, like, plot out all of the different Slayers that we know of, but...
I bet someone has.
I'm
we
sure
should try
somebody.
to find it.
I'm sure somebody has. But, yeah, I completely forgot that there was a mention of a Korean Slayer in the 30s until I rewatched this episode, and I was like, that's cool. I like that.
And they watch the power circle and discover everyone's still there.
Yeah, I just have a note that it's just the worst power circle ever.
Yeah, it kind of is. Because Giles is just like, is everyone here? Okay, go get ready.
Cool. Now, go, yeah. Not be here anymore.
Yeah. So this is where Buffy finds the brain. And she goes, when she goes back into the library and she has her hands held up saying, I'm never going to stop washing my hands. Mm-hmm. I saw her giant flower rings. Oh. And those are so 90s. I had some of those. The rings were like as big around as 3 fingers. But she had one on each hand, and I was like, oh, those are so 90s.
See, I didn't notice the rings. I just thought, man, was she a lot more squeamish in these early seasons than she is later on? Because, like, later on, she's just, like, stabbing demons' eyes out with her thumb.
Yeah. And so this is when they decide to look up Morgan in the computer and discover he had a brain tumor. And they realize the headaches and that, oh no, the demon still needs a brain.
Yeah, and immediately they think of Willow, which is very logical because Willow is a smarty pants.
What could a demon possibly want from me?
What's the square root of 841?
29. Oh, yeah.
And then it moves into Giles attempting to help Mark with his magic show because his assistant got sick. And Mark is showing Giles how to help him with the guillotine trick.
Yeah. This is a really elaborate setup, considering Giles already explained that the demons are supposed to be super strong.
Yes, and also a really elaborate setup for a high school talent magic show thing. But, I mean, I guess if you're actually a demon who can look human, you probably have a lot of money.
Yeah. Made the smart investments. I always hate, this is my biggest pet peeve, is when it's a big problem in Twilight, it's a big problem with anything. When you have a character that can pretty much live forever, like, you know, a demon disguised as a human, a vampire, whatever. Why are they still in high school?
Well, you know, in Twilight, I don't know if it does it in the movies, but in the books it explains that it's so that they can move to an area and stay longer, because the younger they pretend to be, the longer they can stay without aging.
Still, I feel like just don't.
If they move to an area and start school pretending to be like 15, then they can stay longer than if they come as adults, and it shows them not aging.
I would just move around more.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. But you might get tired of moving around. I never understand why vampires and stuff, and usually they are, but there's some like stories and books and stuff where a vampire or something like that has been alive for hundreds of years and they're not rich. I'm like, how are you not rich? Like, you should be a millionaire. So I guess not too elaborate if it's this demon that's been alive for a while.
And he actually knows how to make investments.
Yes. So Giles is helping, and Buffy and Xander and Willow decide that they are still looking for someone. And they're like, Giles, he's with all the people right now, and he can handle himself. But wait, he's really smart. Mm-hmm. They take off running to go help Giles. Yeah,
I love that, like, smash cut to right outside the library, and Buffy's just bolting out, just screaming his name.
Yeah, they've bonded by now.
Yep.
Not as close as they'll get, but they already care about each other.
Yeah.
And so Mark convinces Giles to lay down in a guillotine, and it's explaining how it will work. And Giles is like, well, what's the trick? And Mark goes, trick? And our gang arrives just in time to catch the rope so Giles is not beheaded.
Mm-hmm. And I love all of the little, like, staging that happens to lead to the final joke before the credit sequence of, like, just the Xander catching the rope to where they can hold it in place until the demon's in place and the demon can be decapitated. Willow's got an axe that she was using to free Giles. All the little steps along the way. And I feel like this is a very different scenario than the scenario at the end of Angel, where at the end of Angel, everybody was in the final encounter, but they didn't make a lot of difference. Everybody in this final encounter is essential, and I really like that they balanced all of that out to where everybody was helping to free Giles to take care of the demon.
I like how Sid is the one that gets to actually stab the demon in the heart.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, he's been hunting these demons forever, and so he should get to do that. And then the curtain opens, and there's this really weird scene with a guillotine and a demon and Willow with an axe and Buffy holding a dummy like a baby and all kinds of stuff. And it shows the audience, and Snyder is in the audience, and he kind of looks at him and goes, I don't get it. Which I would be curious as to how they explained that or what they did next. Like, did they...
Giles just stands up and was like, let the show begin. Curtains.
Possibly. Or they improv something, because that would be funny, a little improv scene.
But yeah, Snyder, best line of the episode right there. Right at the very end of the episode. It's fantastic.
Yes.
And then, of course, if you're... familiar with the infamous end credits scene that played when it originally aired and then didn't play in syndication after that, but is included in all like streaming services and DVD box sets, is this lovely rendition of Oedipus Rex by Buffy, Willow, and Xander, which is just the most delightful thing.
O ruler of my country, Oedipus, you see our company around the altar, and I, the priest of Zeus.
Ha ha. They prophesied that I should kill my father, but he is dead and hidden deep in the soil. But surely I must fear my mother's bed.
Oh, Oedipus, Oedipus, unhappy Oedipus, that is all I can call you and all that I ever shall call you.
Darkness and horror of darkness, unfolding, restless, visitant, sped by an ill wind in haste. Madness and stabbing pain and memory of ill deeds I have done.
Also, this is something that my dad pointed out, because we were watching Season 7 and Season 1 simultaneously, because, like I mentioned before, our viewing order was completely jacked. But he's just like, Xander's playing Oedipus, huh? Well, later he loses his eye. So That's
Oh my gosh. Never even thought of it.
so that is a very, very unintentional foreshadowing that's just delightful.
Yes, because that could not possibly have been planned.
Don't undersell the writing staff of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. They knew all along what they were doing. Who knew that the puppet show was really the tell-all episode? Laid out the entire series.
And I like how Willow, during her scene, she just kind of stares crazily
Oh, yeah.
at the audience and then runs away.
They are so good at being bad at acting, which is lovely.
Yeah, Buffy is just really into it. Like, she's hilarious.
And it's one of those, like, all of these are talented actors, so they have to pretend to be bad actors, whereas Charisma Carpenter is actually not a strong singer, so she got to not have to act during those sections when she was singing. I don't know if I'm a good actor or a bad actor. I haven't had enough scenarios where I've had to act, but I don't know how hard it would be to be a good actor and then have to pretend to be a bad actor. I imagine there's a certain challenge there.
Well, that is the end of Puppet Show.
It's a fun little silly episode. I did note, it's a random thing to note, but I did note that the very first season of Buffy and the very last season of Angel, so bookending the entire Buffyverse there, both feature a puppet episode.
If I have to pick, I'm going to go with the Angel one is better. just because it's Angel that is the puppet. Possibly if Buffy had been the puppet, got turned into a puppet in this one, I would think it would be better.
Yeah.
But
but yeah, just a random thing that I thought of the other day. And I was just like, huh.
True. And next time we have Nightmares, which is the very first of the Dream episodes.
I'm interested.
Which are always weird.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how I feel about it, because I think it's going to be another one of those that really misses the mark on some of its emotional stuff, because there's a lot of emotional stuff in that episode, but I know that some of it has, like, real weight in the moment, and I'm interested to, like, look at it. Yeah. I think that's the most interesting part about season 1 to me, is kind of the heaviness of it and the imbalance of how everything concludes.
How it's done. Yeah.
But I remember Nightmares being a heavy episode. And then there's a clown.
There is some very, very much has some silliness in it.
We appreciate everybody so much for listening, and we're gonna do a really crummy outro where we're not sure when to say bye. So I'm gonna say bye, and then Kim's gonna say bye.
Bye.
And then I'm gonna say bye again, just so I can be the last one heard. So take that, Kim. Ha!